to provide education to our students that is the most up-to-date, which engages with local industry. We have organised this event to support our Ready for Work and Life concept. As a result, this event has the title, Business Environment in Vietnam, Perspective of an International Investor, Must-Have Skills for Success, the Role of 5G, and the Pros and Cons of RCEP, which is the Regional Economic Partnerships Initiative. This event builds on the success of previous events held at RMIT, which have also brought together leading public and private sector executives to provide their opinions and to interact with our students in the audience. Vietnam faces a bright future, especially now it seems that vaccines for the coronavirus will soon be available. It's one of our few countries in the world to maintain positive economic growth in the face of the global pandemic, and it has had a vigorous population and government that has shown great determination in managing the virus. Now our speakers will address the issues of where do we go from here and what skills do people need to survive in this dynamic environment. They will also address some of the more important issues in technology and international relations facing Vietnam today. As you may have seen from our previous events and also from today, famous experts, managers from the industries and government policymakers have been invited to present their views on the topics related to international business and the context of Vietnam. I'll just run through quickly our speakers and presenters. First of all, welcome to Ms. Chau, who is an executive director in SC Capital Partners Group. She's going to talk on the business environment in Vietnam. Also to Ms. Felicity Brown. She is a career consultant and development industry engagement expert. And she's going to talk on the must-have skills for success in an international company. Our own Dr. John Walsh is going to talk about the RCEP and the pros and cons for Vietnam. And finally, we're going to have a talk from Mr. Denis Brunetti, who on the impact of 5G in our environment in Vietnam. That's going to be followed by a panel discussion, and that's going to be chaired by our Head of Department for Management, Dr. Chung Nguyen. Before we actually finish this introduction, I'd just like to offer some gifts to our speakers. I know that we're all disparate and spread around, but I think Dr. Chung's just disappeared to provide a gift for one of our speakers, and the rest of them will receive by courier, or in Hanoi, I think Dr. John will present our speaker there as well. So can I say that I hope you have an engaging and enriching session ahead, and thank you very much for attending today. Thank you. Now I'd pass over to Dr. Chung, who will start to introduce our speakers.
Thank you very much, Bob. I just want to follow up with what you have just said. I give the gift to one of our great speakers today. Thank you, Ms. Chau. I will talk a little bit about the background of the event and also the speaker shortly. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, this is my great honor again to be the moderator for the today event. And this is the annual event which purposely designed for our IB and MIB students because it relates to many important domains of the international business, either in domestic or international markets, right? This is the background of the today event. As you may have known, earlier this year, the government of Vietnam already approved the digital strategy for Vietnam. They focus on the digital, and they call it digital Vietnam, Vietnam số hóa in Vietnamese, right? And with the aims at digital government, digital economy, and digital society. So this is really great vision. But the remaining question would be how to make this vision a reality, right? Of course, the new tech like 5G playing crucial roles in this process. All of us have 4G internet connection, but 5G internet connection make a huge difference in many areas. So today we will have the president of Sony Ericsson to talk about this in our event. Secondly, we know that most of the big firms in the world invested in China, operated in China. And these firms, they have the so-called China Plus One strategy, right? Which means that they also look at other markets apart from China. And recently we have trade war between China and US and the uncertainty of the COVID-19 pandemic. So these make Vietnam an attractive destination for international investors. And but whether or not Vietnam has offer a great business environment yet, we will discuss in today's discussion with the very high-profile guest speaker, who is the chairwoman of OSCHAM ASEAN. Really great. And also Vietnam reintegrate in the global economy late compared to other peers in the region. But by now we have 13 right FTAs, including the recent CP, TPP, and we are working on RCEP. And how would it impact Vietnam, because China also in the deal. So we have a top economic expert in Vietnam to discover this topic. Stay tuned. And finally, in a rapid changing world like today, we need to learn new skills. We need to re-skill and we need to upskill, right? So what would be the skill that one must have, especially for our students? A topical question that can be answered by one of the experienced guru in the field who make change to thousands of lives, our students and alumni. You will see in a second. And really, I'm excited to listen to all the above speakers in the next 2 hours. You know that they bring with about more than 80 years of experience, and they really passionate in the field. I would like to thank all the guest speakers and the leadership of the school, and also the pro team and the event team who make this happen. Thanks also to our beloved students who really care about Vietnam, care about their family, and care about themselves by attending this event. Without further ado, here are our great speakers for our today event. So I would like to shortly introduce their bio so that you can see how high profile they are. Next slide, please. So these are the section that we go through. Miss Chau and then Miss Felicity Brown and John Watt, Dr. John Watt and Dennis Brunati. So go to the next slide. We will see next one. We will see more about our speakers. Next one, please. So you can see in my and even you can see right here. She's sitting with me right here, right? So Miss Chau is quite famous in Vietnam and business community. She is executive director and also legal transaction of the SC Capital Partners. But the more important, like you can see, we stand out this slide. You know that she's served many years in OSCHAM of Vietnam. But we really proud. She's the Australian Vietnamese, and she's actually, the chair of the OSCHAM ASEAN and the director of the board of OSCHAM Vietnam. So going forward, we have more events like this to talk about it today. And the next one is, yes, we already mentioned, so academic background, all that you will see in this slide. Next one, please. For Miss Felicity Brown, you see that she has 30 years experience, and the next slide will show that she's got so many, the relevant certificates, and the whole careers of her up until now is just to coach people, to career transition coaching and development, and she has been with RMIT about 6 years, and always joined us in all of the important events for postgraduate and undergraduate students who have to navigate their career. So thank you, Phyllis, for joining us today as well. Thank you so much. Next one, please. And here's my beloved, academics. The only ones so far at RMIT have the Oxford, PhD from Oxford University. And if you type John Walsh, Dr. John Walsh and RMIT, you will see more than 500,000, result in Google right now if you do it. And he is an expert and gurus in many areas. And recently he really a top leader in the free trade. And he is a senior program manager of our department in the IB and MIB. Thank you, John, like usual, and for organizing all of the stuff, for putting together all the topics and people. Thank you once again. Last but not least, Mr. Dennis Brunetti. You know that Sony Ericsson is one of the top providers, especially like I mentioned, digital environment right now. He will join a bit late. He's not joining yet because the people like him very high profile and busy, right? And so he will join us later and he will present to us about the topic on 5G. So all, with the support from, guest speaker, I do believe that we're gonna have a great event ahead. So May, can you move to the next slide, please? No, this is about me, so it's okay not to talk about me, right? So next slide, please. So in the agenda, we because the introduction a bit longer than usual, I love to do those. So we started with the first one in 20 minutes, for 20 minutes with Chau to talk about the business environment in Vietnam. And after four speakers, we have the panel discussion. Please remember that a lot of journalists from other local press already sent the questions. I would encourage my student, John's student, and all other students in the department, raise the question, show RMIT values and how proactive you are by raising questions. And maybe who knows that Mr. Dennis or Ms. Jota will recruit you immediately after this event, right? So go ahead. Thank you very much. And now floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm looking for the kind words. And everybody, very pleased to be here. Next slide, and I'll talk a little bit. So my purpose today is I'm going to talk about facts about Vietnam, investment environment in Vietnam, the barriers to investment, and then the Vietnam competitive edge. Just remember, it'll be with a twist. I'm the legal transaction counsel, heads of legal for a private equity fund investing in real estate pan-Asia, including Vietnam. So this is all across ASEAN and Australia. So talking about Vietnam's competitive edge, I'll make a spin on the real estate market. First slide, next slide, I mean. Okay, so fast facts on Vietnam. If you can just have a look there. These are, if you do a search and you find out what are the current hot facts that everybody is speaking on the tip of their tongue about Vietnam, is the strategic location that we are. So if you can imagine yourself looking or thinking about the S, Vietnam surrounds and is a border to China, and we're also access to landlocked countries such as Myanmar, Cambodia, and partially also Laos. So what that does is it actually provides Vietnam this very strategic location for businesses, especially as you can see in recent months, especially post-COVID, and that this factor that we're talking about, the trade war between US and China, is that there's an offlow or a flow of manufacturing, for example, or logistics, industrial parks, investment type flowing into Vietnam because of the strategic location that we are in. Trade agreements, this will be Dr. John will be speaking on this, so I won't touch it, but we are the V in VIP, the VIP, that is Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. So I'll leave Dr. John to talk more about that. Relatively low cost. So this is actually the one thing I want to spin on a little bit. The low cost here, we're talking about setup costs. We're talking about, the expense of setting up an office. But the biggest thing here is the labor cost. So what you have is, although we've heard and we've been following, is that the minimum wage rates in Vietnam is currently on an increment increase, but we still are one of the lowest labor costs in Southeast Asia of the top emerging markets. So compared ourselves, we are at an average, or you're talking about the minimum wage of, in US dollars term, $192 per month. Here, you're talking about China is 363, Indonesia is 287, and then the Philippines is 332. What that means is that huge gap that you can see in terms of where we are as an economy per capita, GDP and everything. There's still a lot of room to catch up on, showing the competitiveness of Vietnam in that relatively low setup costs. Then the next thing is here, we're talking about we having the highest population and the highest density in the world. So here we've actually got the 15th largest population in the world, currently around 97 million people. By 2030, it's estimated we're going to be 104 million. That's on real real estimations. We're not talking about there'll be populations that are not recorded or outside of the records, public records. Then what that means is, and you've heard this, is that Vietnam's workforce is characterized as young, and you guys make up that population. Young, highly disciplined, hardworking, quick in learning, adaptable, committed to work, giving it a very competitive edge. So I'll talk about this later in the last part of my talk today. And one thing to note, and you know this, is that the average age of a Vietnamese is 32.5 years old at the moment. We have over 70% under the age of 35. Now, that means the workforce is there to support the growth that Vietnam is trying to catch in the next 5 coming years. Then we go down, so okay, the change in legal environments, our Vietnamese legal system is chasing reality. That means we are constantly changing and fitting laws, making change to react to and to adapt to what is currently happening in the market. So what that shows, and I'll talk about this later on, but what that shows, it shows the government's incentivized, the way that the government is approaching is they are economically driven, and they're pushing for economic growth. So all the changes in law, as you'll see, is always for the benefit of internationalization and development of investment into Vietnam. And of course, the last point I want to stress is that we are considered as a politically and stable economy. Now, if you talk about politics, so you talk about the fact that we are a communist country, and then you talk about democracy and all of that, politics aside, that is actually the fact that we are a communist country, that we are governed by one voice, one government together. That's why we have swift government response to COVID. And that's why Vietnam has been able to recover quicker than the rest of the world because of that very fact. And that, to an investor, to a foreign investor like ourselves, SC Capital, this is an advantage to be seriously taken into consideration when we're thinking about going into investment into a foreign country, is that the stability of the economy is the longevity of our investments into that country. Next slide, please. So here, if you just look at this, and I know it's a lot of numbers and a lot of things, this is, as you see, it ranks, it has ranks where Vietnam is, and this is based on World Bank, but of course, this summary was tallied by AsiaLink, an Australian corporation that provides cultural studies and intelligence in terms of investments into Asia, including Vietnam. All that I wanted you to take out of this slide is that Vietnam is, in its true meaning, an emerging market. And what it shows is that we are still climbing the ranks, and that there are more rankings to climb. What that means is, as an investor, there is room for improvement, therefore there's still opportunities for investment. So you can look at this more clearly in terms of what each of those ranks are, but that's just a sum that I want you to see. Next slide, please. So here, barriers to investments, and you hear this over and over again, process of starting a business. So here, earlier we're talking about it's low cost, but low cost comes at a cost. That is, it takes, the process of starting a business takes a long time, takes longer time than the rest of the world. We're currently ranking 70th in how many countries? In 190 economies, we're ranking 70th. What that means is, and you can see that we have, and if you read newspapers, that the government is trying to shorten the administrative process and everything. And like I said earlier, all this indicates is that there is a willingness of the government to improve investment conditions for foreign investors coming in. And so for us as a real estate investor, this is a positive look, right? Now, the next point is relevant to us, is dealing with construction permits. This process, there are actually, it takes on the record, or what they say it will take is 110 days for 11 different procedures to happen before we can get a construction permit. That puts aside about us getting our investment license, getting all the compliances, getting us to a stage where everything is ready for lodgement for a construction permit. Just remember that each and every point here that I raise, in terms of most of them that are barriers to investment, is a positive for a committed investor coming into Vietnam, because the process of starting a business is tough or takes a long time. But if you can do it, you'll be able to get in and therefore take the market share better than others who don't know how to enter the market. The same way with dealing with construction permits. If you have a team that know how to do it and work with the system, then you would be able to do a better job at investing and getting your construction permit, for example, better than another foreign investor. So electricity has always been an issue. So here you're talking about connecting to the grid, the pricing, but more at the basic level, the stability of electricity, right? So, you know, if you're in the country town, in my husband's country town is Madea, every Sunday they shut down the electricity in the morning all the way until 6 p.m. And that's because it's the sharing of the grid to make sure that the city has enough electricity to share, right? So this is for investors, and especially those in the manufacturing or even in the cold storage space, this would be a challenge, right? Registering a property, similarly. So all of this, if you read down to it, but the one point there, getting credit, is we're talking about the liquidity of the market. So I'm only spinning this on real estate investors like us. The barrier to investment here is the fact that there is limited funding available for individuals or for, you know, for companies to get for interim borrowing to get their projects to a certain stage where they can then go into construction. Because once you get to construction, you'll be able to get deposits. I'm talking more into real estate now, so it's getting a bit detailed. But at that point in time, when you can get deposits from your end buyers, for example, for a residential sale, you can use that money. You've got the inflows and outflows of money to be able to then put it as security to the bank, and the bank will then lend you to borrow money for the bigger construction. But that's only until you get to the point where you get the deposit. So in the interim, it's very hard for small to medium enterprises to obtain a credit, a loan, a line of credit, a bank guarantee, for example, because they won't be able to show that they have supporting, proof of financial capacity to pay out the debt, for example. So this is, and again, the barriers to investment here is a barrier that is visibly you can see, but this in itself is an opportunity for other foreign investors coming in to provide, for example, interim lines of credit. So us as real estate developers and investors, we don't actually need to go in and only build things in Vietnam. We can go in and provide mezzanine loans to real estate investors in Vietnam. That is, we come in like a lender, but not, and we take shares as a pledge, as security. And if they don't pay, we take over the project. So there's so many ways of looking at this. So hence when I say barriers, you're gonna always have to look at it on both sides of the lens, right? Protecting investors, this is, you're talking about rules of shareholders, the governance of the Vietnamese legal system in terms of protecting, or when we as shareholders have a dispute, we go and we go to the courts and we try to enforce our rights. And of course, the court system in itself can be cumbersome and a hindrance. And then of course, the other one, and we're talking about protecting investors. So us as investors coming in, we're gonna have to have employees, right? So the courts tends to protect employees rather than employers. Yeah, so these are things. Paying tax is always an issue because of the many systems that we need to go through to pay taxes, to even pay taxes, to be recorded as a taxpayer. And then after all of that, it's how then do you get those taxes recognized as a you know, an offset. I know I'm talking on very broad senses, but and then one thing I want to mention is culture. Now, culture here, yes, culture here is to understand the working culture of the Vietnamese people in Vietnam. This is, and you've got to understand, and you may, but maybe because we are younger, a younger generation, so we're more self-conscious. But the culture of the Vietnamese people is that we emphasize on the importance of relationships, responsibilities, and obligations of a group. We collectively think of a country as a collective country and community. So what that means is when it comes to companies, for example, you think of the company or the collective community rather than the actual business itself or the individual within it. So this is very different to a Western mentality of individual focus rather than community focus. So this difference is a barrier, but once somebody can understand that barrier, they can actually fit in very well into the market and therefore have an upper hand in encroaching into the Vietnamese business environment. Next slide, please. So competitive edge, and I've skipped through a lot of this because I want to get to where we are. So like I said, a lot of the things that I said earlier in terms of barriers, it's also an edge, right? So market access here, as we know, a lot of some of the industries are prohibited or very restricted for foreign investors. So you say real estate itself, where we are, there's still some restrictions in terms of foreign ownership. So you know the difference of a foreigner cannot own land, not for long term, but all that we can own is a leasehold. So that in itself is difficult. So you've got other markets like the healthcare, which I'll talk a little bit about later. Healthcare as well as telecom, right? Telecommunication, for example. But the reason why I said market access is a competitive edge is that once you can get that access, the competition that you face is much less than if you enter a free market in the sense everything is recognized, stable. Like Australia, for example, as soon as you come in, you already know what your market, your profit margin would be, right? So your risk is much less. So market access here is that it's very attractive because the high risk, high returns. The same thing with real estate, high risk, high returns. And for us, as a real estate investor, we focus on the amount of end users or end buyers. And here, go back to the earlier point that I said about the young population and the under the age of 35. What that means is that this is now, and it goes to my second point, fast growing middle class, right? So the first part, it's a fast growing middle class that has high demand for better lifestyle, better healthcare system, better food, better everything. And so there is a huge market out there. And even if we're talking about real estate investors like us, there is already a sector that you can focus on in terms of your investments. For example, affordable housing. That's what we're doing in Vietnam. So that in itself is an opportunity. But then you go to the next part of that, that second bullet point is the aging population. So of course, we talked about 70% of us are under the age of 35. But in 10 years' time, that 70% will shift to the age of 45 and getting older, right? So what that means is there is a high demand for hospitals, health insurance, systems to be better and brought up to a better standard. And this is where the opportunities lies, is the expansion, for example, in the health insurance or the hospital systems. And you may think it's not related to real estate, but it's everything to do with real estate, because in Vietnam, every investment you do is related to real estate. So for us as a real estate investor, these three things and all the barriers to entry to Vietnam is in fact an attractiveness of entry into Vietnam for us. So compare that to the rest of Asia, and as Dr. Chung said earlier, I'm head of chair of ASEAN ASEAN, that we are at this point in time the #1 wanted country for investment at the moment, and the government is making change. And when Dr. John later talks about the RCEP, that's a huge opportunity for Vietnam to easily merge into what it's already a part of, the bigger trade world with the ASEAN countries. But yeah, so that's my take on Vietnam and its competitive or investment in Vietnam. At this point in time, it's very hot, and you need to be able to take advantage of the barriers to investments to be able to make a bigger impact in Vietnam. Thank you.
Excellent, Mr. Chau. I think it's a lot of insight over there. Some of the things you presented, we did mention to our students as well. So kind of like she present about the dual market access or dual points about the business environment. We can discuss a little bit later, but that also come from the doing business report by the World Bank. And she did mention that, you know, normally at this time of the year, we have already the report, but this year haven't come out yet, maybe because of the COVID. Thank you once again, Mr. Jota, for the useful presentation, and we look forward to the discussion afterwards. Thanks. Next slide, please, Sam. So the next topic would be the must-have skill for success in an international company. Like I said earlier, the experienced guru from the university and also from the world, I would say 30 years of experience would tell us, because we need to reskill, we have to upskill, right? So, and now is really timing for us to start to look at that. The floor is yours, Ms. Felicity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Trong. And that was a really amazing presentation by Chau. So thank you to Chau. Look, it's my great pleasure to present today about the must-have skills for success in an international company. Just a little bit more about me. I'm originally from Australia. I have been here in Vietnam for 6 years, that's correct, but I have 18 years of experience working in Asia across 5 countries: Japan, Indonesia, Hong Kong, if you say that's a country, Malaysia and Vietnam. Just to give a bit of idea about my background as well, I first started off in banking when I graduated, and then I moved into the Australian government, where I worked for a long time and was a diplomat. So I had a lot of international experience there, and moved into higher education around 8 years ago. And I am a career coach now. So I work with a lot of people working in international companies who are also transferred to Vietnam, and help them with intercultural training in particular. So in no particular order, I've identified 5 must-have skills. These are more soft skills, the human skills, rather than technical skills. So if you just keep that in mind as we go through these types of skills, maybe some of them are sort of qualities. No, I think mostly more skills. If you can focus on these and master these, it's going to give you an edge. So next slide. First one. This one really probably is number 1, resilience. So what is resilience? You know, resilience is about being able to bounce forward even in times of adversity. So we often talk about, you know, picking ourselves up when things are tough, or bouncing back. And now people like to talk about bouncing forward. So you move, you improve even on where you have been before. A really important skill in these COVID times. It's very much involves being able to adapt to ever-changing environments. I mean, we've been saying for the past few years how quickly things change. Well, no more than this year, 2020. So much change. Really, the people and the companies for that matter, but the people who have survived and thrived this year have been able to show their resilience. show how they can adapt and change very quickly, and even when times are tough, to still be able to manage themselves, manage their workloads, and contribute to their companies. So resilience and adaptation is my number one. Number two, the next one is, and it's related to resilience, you know, part of resilience is being creative and innovative. International companies really value this skill. Creativity is not being about artistic, it's really about having creative ideas, great ideas. Now, great ideas are only great if you are willing to share them. So that you need to consider that. Develop those creative ideas. Don't be shy about them. Be prepared to share them. With your ideas, they don't need to be new ideas. Partly with innovation really is about seeing what else is out there, how have other people done it, and how can you improve on that, and improve existing practices in the company that you're working in. I mean, this is really going to be valuable for the company. So creativity and innovation is my second must-have skill. Next slide. All right, number three, intercultural skills. I mentioned earlier how I often work here with expats who are being brought to Vietnam to help them to understand the environment here. Just like Chau said, you know, about the collectivist nature of society here. I mean, that's very important about relationship building and so on. The expats who come here need to understand that. Conversely, of course, and I guess most of you, but not all of you, are Vietnamese students out there. You having an idea and having quite a deep understanding of other cultures is really going to help you in international companies, whether you're working here in Vietnam or you're working globally. International environments mean diverse teams. So thinking about that, you're going to be working with people who come from different countries. Even within Vietnam, people come from different cultures, maybe from the north, the central, the south, more from the provinces, the big cities. Intercultural skills are required international companies or otherwise. Now, intercultural skills, what is that? I mean, the important thing to know is that we all come with our set of experiences which shape our view of the world. We don't even perhaps know about this so much until we come into contact with people from other nationalities, other cultures. Be ready to challenge your own assumptions about what's right and wrong. Sometimes when we go into international environments, we see other people from other places doing things very differently. Don't always think that our way is the right way. All right, be curious and understand things from others' perspective. Be willing to, as I said, challenge your own perspective about things. The person who is in an international company and who doesn't put forward necessarily their own view about things all the time, but really encourages diverse views, is going to do better in an international company. Next skill. All right, this is one of my favorites. I guess it relates to emotional intelligence. I've called it self-leadership and authenticity. Now, authenticity is a bit of an unusual one. I think a lot of people don't think about this so much, but I really value this. Maybe it's more of a quality here, but it is maybe about having confidence, having the self-esteem to be yourself. When you're working in an international environment, in an international company, you want to be able to stand out from the crowd. You need to challenge yourself to be yourself, be different, don't have to be like everybody else. Self-leadership is about managing yourself, managing your emotions, and realizing that we are all leaders. Whether you are in an entry-level position or you're the CEO, we are all leaders. So, you know, being able to have that mindset about that you are able to lead yourself and that your contribution is leading the company in a positive direction. Authenticity is about being real. It's about being yourself. In an international company, don't hesitate to show a bit of personality. That's who people are going to remember you for. Don't be a cookie cutter, as we say. Don't just try and be like everybody else or be what you think other people want you to be. Show your personality. Show what you can do, what you think you can do. Of course, being humble at the same time is very important. But yeah, the thing is if you're yourself, you're a known quality and a known quantity. People will work with people. You will build trust with people and integrity if you are yourself every day at work. So that's why I say authenticity and that mindset of leadership. Next one. All right. Finally, I wanted to talk about growth mindset. When I talk to students about growth mindset, it seems like it's not a very well-known term here in Vietnam. So some of you might know what it is, and others who don't, I really encourage you to do some internet searching and learn more about this concept. It's really important for your growth that it's a bit of that, this knowing yourself, the self-awareness, who I am, how do I think about things, how do I encourage myself to grow? And with growth mindset, it's really about being willing to experiment and try new things. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Often international environments will offer you the place where you can try new things and you know, sometimes it doesn't go as well as you planned, but that's okay because you learn from that experience and you learn from trying that experiment so that you can fix things and do better next time and learn something about yourself in the process. Growth mindset is about striving for excellence but not being a perfectionist. Universities and high schools grow perfectionists. Probably many of us are perfectionists because that's the education system that's brought us up, and our parents encourage us to get HDs and so on. And so we are really thinking that we don't want to go outside our comfort zone because, you know, that's not comfortable. And so I'll just stick with what I know. I challenge you to incorporate the growth mindset wherever possible, to challenge yourself, get out of your comfort zone, to learn new things, try new things, take some risks and learn from it, and you know, really just do your best. So I think for me, they're the main 5 must skills, if you ask me, as a career coach, that I think are really important to the growth of individuals working in international companies. Next slide, please. So that's from my point of view. That's my LinkedIn. I really encourage you all to connect with me on LinkedIn. I am here at RMIT in the job shop based in Saigon South Campus, but I'm also happy to work with students from Hanoi campus as well. As Dr. Trong mentioned earlier, my particular interest is postgraduate students, and I love working with postgraduate students. You have invested a lot in your education, and it's of particular interest to me that I help you get launched into the type of career that you would like for the future. So you can connect with me anytime, send me a message, and I'm willing, of course, to conduct one-on-one consultations with you about your future career. Thank you very much.
Great. Where do I turn on my? Can you turn on my stomach? Okay. Great. Thank you. Great, Phyllis. Thank you so much. If you open up a short course on this, I will be the first student who join the short course on leadership and must-have skills. Thank you. Indeed, you raised 2 things. I and the student will ask later, but 2 things that particularly related to us. One of the students already asked Mr. Chau on the area of culture, and you did mention also intercultural skill as well. So really, you know, it applied right here at RMIT. You know that we have 30 plus nationality working for RMIT right now, and Vietnamese and Australians mostly, and many people, right? Exactly what you say there. So really, this is something our students will learn. And they also, a lot of my students also want to do the postgraduate as well. So they will see you later on. So thank you once again so much on that. And your presentation remind me about John Maxwell as well, another guru in leadership. And one of journalists asked him, so if I'm young, how can I lead? Who I lead? He said, lead yourself. That's the tough one, right? So like you say, self-leadership, something. A lot of good stuff in there. Thank you once again. Thank you. Next slide, please. Now that we already mentioned, right? So Vietnam joined a bit late in the regional economic, you know, and global economy. But Vietnam really go fast in the past, you know, 2 decades. And right now we have 13 FTAs. And all of the latest one, even though now for the EV FTA, only South Korea, Singapore, and Vietnam have it, right? Other Asian haven't got it at all. And now we have RCEP in the place. And RCEP, like other media say, is a big deal. It's important. So we really want to hear from our top experts, from economic experts. Floor is yours, Dr. John Walsh, on RCEP, please.
Hello, thank you for your kind words, Dr. Chung. I'm very grateful to you and to the leadership of the School of Business and Management for giving me the opportunity to speak to you here today. Thank you everybody for attending. I hope that you are enjoying the session. My name is John Walsh. I'm the Senior Program Manager for International Business here at RMIT Vietnam, speaking to you from our sunny Hanoi campus. And my topic today, the pros and cons of Vietnam's joining the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. So the next slide, please. Okay, so the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or the RCEP, was signed here in Hanoi at a virtual conference by the 10 Association of Southeast Asian Nation countries, plus 5 of the largest regional trading partners, China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. For the large countries, China, Japan, and Korea, this is about the first time that one single international organization has included them all. And those of you who are interested in history will realize the difficult relations that have been between these 3 countries and which continue to be a feature today. And this is one of the main benefits, as I will come on to in a moment, of the RCEP, is to unite different countries in organizations where they're able to talk to each other. Overall, the organization unites about 30% of the world's population and about 30% of global GDP in one free trade agreement. So you can tell this is a very large thing and an important step forward for Asian countries to deal with other Asian countries without the need for Western intervention. As you note, there is no American participation in the RCEP. We can anticipate in the future that the next American president may take more interest in our region, but the previous one, the still current one, did not very much. The RCEP overall makes provisions for the elimination of approximately 90% of tariffs. It also introduces rules of origin and investment protection, and these are the headline aspects of the agreement altogether. The next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, the main benefits of this organization are to help maintain peace among members. RCEP is similar, we will hope, in the future to ASEAN and also to the European Union, the EU, as being an organization in which its members, its current members, have never shown war against each other. We know that in the Southeast Asian region, especially in mainland Southeast Asia, there has been warfare among the different countries for hundreds, if not thousands of years. However, just as in Europe, once countries have signed the international or the transnational agreement, there has been no warfare between them. Now, we would hope that this would also apply to the RCEP because there is a potential for strain in conflict between, for example, Vietnam and China over the East Sea or South China Sea islands and China's role there. And my second point, this provides a rule-based occasion for multilateral discussions. one of the main problems that we have in dealing with international relations in this region is the complexity of the issues. So if we think about the difficulty of managing rivers, especially rivers that come from China and flow down into the mainland Southeast Asian region, and also in the island disputes, is to understand what is the law, what law does exist in these cases. And often the case is, well, there is no real law, and there is nothing that people can talk about. So to be part of a multilateral organization gives countries an opportunity to find ways to discuss these issues within an organization to which they both belong. And this is a considerable step forward and helps to rule the world on a peaceful and rules-based method. We would hope again that the American side will also participate in rules-based diplomacy in the region in the future. And this will be a departure from the current American administration, which has little concern for rules and little concern for organizations and multilateral discussions. Thirdly, it brings ASEAN's major regional partners into ASEAN's accepted procedures. In other words, countries such as China in particular are signing up to do things the way that Southeast Asian nations are also doing things. And so it cannot be claimed that China is doing something different or is organizing the situation so that Southeast Asian nations must follow what it is doing. In fact, it's the other way around. So ASEAN has established a number of procedures, a number of processes and ways of doing things, and because its large partners want to do further business with us, with ASEAN, they are willing to agree to the ASEAN way of doing things. So that means that not only Australia and New Zealand, but Japan, China, Korea will be following ASEAN norms in the future for business and for investment into the region in both directions. The next slide, please. However, this is a free trade agreement, an FTA, and free trade agreements in general have the characteristic that they intensify market competition. And that means that in any country which signs an FTA, there will be winners and losers. Some people will win because they have more opportunities and they can export and invest overseas. And some people will lose because the markets in which they have been active, they will find themselves no longer able to compete. And so therefore they may be forced out of business. So here there is a role for government. Government can pretty much ignore the winners. The winners can look after themselves. They are the winners in this case. However, it is the losers that the government must concern themselves with, because these are people who may need to be retrained or reskilled in order to move into a different kind of economic activity. Now, some people, the younger, the more educated people, will be able to do this, right? They can move from one farming activity to another farming activity, or move to a different region, a different province, or even into a different economic activity altogether. However, there are some people, often the older and less educated people, who cannot do this. And these are the real losers from the globalization that free trade agreements provide. And these are people which the government must support with some subsidies of some kind. Secondly, FTAs spread globalization into new areas of people's lives. And in some cases, people will consider this to be unpleasant or unwanted, because there are some areas of life that people consider to be culturally sensitive, and they don't want too much foreign involvement or foreign interference, as people might say. So in some kinds of food or clothing, or the way that people react to each other, or interactions or social relations, these become more globalized, which people consider to be more westernized or modernized, and this is not always popular. There are many people, it tends to be older people, but it's not always older people, who feel that in this case the Vietnamese way of doing things should be maintained and respected. And when these traditional cultural activities and social relations are interrupted by globalization, this is considered to be too much, and people can resist this. So there's a potential for some kind of a social conflict in these areas. Many of you, our students, will be very familiar with this. Those of you who want to have dyed hair or earrings or other kinds of bodily adornments, right? That the parents are not always very pleased with this, and this reflects on a small scale the larger kind of issue in society generally. Thirdly, the RCEP as I said, follows ASEAN standards and ASEAN norms. And as we know, ASEAN exists almost entirely on the economic aspect. I mean, there are some social and cultural parts to ASEAN, but fundamentally it is an economic organization. Currently, it does not really cover labor or environmental standards to the extent we would like to see them covered. And the RCEP is similar to this. Okay, it deals with trade and tariffs, it provides investment promotion, investment protection and so forth, but labor standards, environmental standards are essentially left out. Finally, there is no provision for what are called sensitive areas. So sensitive areas relate in some ways to the things that people consider to be culturally sensitive, but also to issues of military spending, military security, homeland security, and so forth, which governments don't really want to discuss, and they don't want other people or other governments really knowing what they're doing, because, as they say, it is sensitive, and they don't want interference. And so FTAs in this case, the RCEP follows that procedure by not involving itself in areas which some governments don't want to govern themselves. However, in the future, we can anticipate that existing processes and procedures, once people gain confidence in them, feel sure that they will be sustainable and more or less permanent, it is likely that those areas will spread out generally, and so more and more areas will be considered, and there will be generally less sensitivity, we hope, in the future. The next slide, please. So at the level of the state, the country, what are the main impacts of the RCEP as it stands at the moment? Well, first of all, it enhances Asian nations' confidence in leading transnational organizations themselves. There is no external involvement of Western powers. There is no desire to try to manipulate or force Asian countries to abide by decisions or protocols that have been designed elsewhere. This is purely an leading Asian nations organization, and this enhances the confidence that people have that Asian nations can do these things and lead these things, and therefore is a harbinger of things to come. Secondly, it creates a new layer of ministerial meetings and cooperation opportunities, and this is a kind of evolutionary perspective. There will be new ways in which cooperation can take place, and therefore there will be more confidence built between nations, and as more confidence is built, the layers of cooperation will be both broadened and deepened. Thirdly, the need to abide by transnational protocols and processes will require local governments to promote domestic reforms. Right? They will want to, first of all, meet the requirements put upon them, but they'll also want to be able to take advantage of any new opportunities that come their way. And if that means promoting domestic reform in order to do so, then there is a big incentive for them to take this opportunity. If they don't, they're likely to be left behind. We have seen previously how Vietnam is competitive in international markets and in attracting foreign direct investment. But if some of the barriers which still do exist are not removed, then that competitiveness can slip away in the future. And fourthly, in this aspect, it cements the role of global value chains, GVCs, at a time of potential deglobalization, or as some people call it, slowbalization. So we focus, our students will know that we focus on the role of global value chains as one means by which Vietnamese companies and institutions can become involved in international trade and business and benefit from it. And it is to Vietnam's great benefit, therefore, to the economy's benefit, that this agreement makes the role of global value chains pretty much paramount in the international economic system of South and East Asia as a whole. The next slide, please. Okay, at the firm level, there are new opportunities in exporting. There are new challenges from importing. As I said previously, there will be winners and losers, as free trade agreements always provide. Some firms will be able to thrive, others will need additional support. More inwards direct foreign investment will lead to a greater level of direct employment, the possibility of technology transfer, the spin-off effects, the things that we usually talk about when we come to foreign direct investment and how it will have big impact on local economies. There will be opportunities to create and participate in networks and in both supply and value chains. As I noted previously, these will become cemented into the DNA of international business and international trade in the region. And Vietnamese government will be, I'm sure, assisting companies to participate in these new ventures, and in particular to address the need for small companies to see the missing middle. Okay, the fact that small and medium-sized enterprises are mostly small or micro-sized, and the middle-sized companies that international investors would like to become partners, long-term partners sometimes, are missing, and there is a need to buttress this area of the economy. The next slide, please. Okay, so finally, what do Vietnamese firms need to do? Well, there are three suggestions here. The first one is digitalization. Even for small firms, we live now in a coronavirus world, and the new normal, as we hopefully will emerge from this, as eventually vaccines are made available, will continue some of the norms that have been established. For example, the withdrawal of the individual. Companies around the world have seen it is possible to do business virtually, remotely, and without face-to-face interaction, and that it is convenient and cheap to do so, and so they will continue to do so. And so for Vietnamese firms to want to participate in these kinds of interactions, they must be fully capable with the whole range of internet media to do business virtually. Secondly, to be ready to upgrade the skills and capacities that they have in order to participate in the various value chains that are possible to them. And then finally, like the samurai, be patient, be silent, be still, but be ready to strike suddenly to take the blow which is necessary. Okay, opportunities come from time to time. We cannot always hurry them, but we can be ready when they do come. And the next slide, please, will allow me to say, okay, thank you very much for your attention. I'll be glad in due course to welcome all of your questions and feedback. And with that, I will say thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. John, for the very insightful. I think a lot of students will take it for the reflection because they have the choice to select whatever speaker, right? Maybe all of the speaker they will select, but your slide will be longest, and so they will take it as a reflection. Really interesting talk about RCEP and EVFTA, as John mentioned earlier, and this is really topical thing. And give me 10 seconds to also talk about the book that John and I and also Burkhard from RMIT to publish next year, early next year on this topic. And you have a lot more to come while waiting for the next guest speaker to come. All right. Can I check from Hanoi side that it is ready for our next guest speaker?
Yes, on the same one that I'm using, please.
Okay. All good. So, like I mentioned earlier from the beginning, you know that Vietnam government already implemented the strategy, and really they think this is the Điện Biên Phủ, the next Điện Biên Phủ in terms of, you know, they try to beat this battle important because that kind of contribute to the final victory of the war. So they consider digital transformation, digital technology, and also digital government, digital society, digital economy is the important. And of course, if you look at South Korea, Australia, and many other countries, the infrastructure is have to be at the beginning. Of course, it's more than that. It have to be people, management, other things. But infrastructure have to be, you know, from the beginning. Without infrastructure, almost nothing there. So I really have an honor to introduce our guest speaker, who will have a lot of experience in Vietnam and leading a lot of, you know, in other markets as well, in Southeast Asia and also in other parts of Asia. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Dennis Prunetti, who have 27 years of experience, and we'll talk about the impact of 5G on the socio-economic development in Vietnam. And I also liked the word success as well. That's what Vietnam really needs right now. So over to you. The floor is yours now, Mr. Dennis.
Good day, Chung. Thanks for that. Can you see me, by the way? Have you got the visual on as well, the video?
Not yet. John, can you turn on your...
Yeah. Can you see me now?
Yeah, definitely. Excellent.
Great. Am I too close or should I push back a bit?
Whatever. Maybe
well,
closer.
okay,
Closer
great.
the better.
No worries, Chung. Absolutely. Thank you, by the way, for the introduction. It's actually 30 years now, not 27 anymore. So you've made me feel 3 years younger, at least. That must be an older bio. So it's been 30 years. So I've been working in the ICT industry, in Ericsson specifically, actually, across 7 countries, including Sweden and Australia, where I'm originally from. From my family name, you can probably tell I've got an Italian background. So my parents are Italian. But I was born in Australia, worked for Ericsson since 1990, based in various countries, including our headquarters in Sweden, but also, of course, in Vietnam for several years now as president, since 2017, actually, as president in Vietnam, Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos. But I also worked in and out of the Vietnam market maybe since, I think, 1996, as I recall. So it's been a long time really engaging the Vietnam market, and it's been a great journey, actually, and I'll come to that a little bit later as well. But really, what I wanted to sort of highlight today was 5G, the importance of 5G from a digital infrastructure perspective, but really paint a broader picture in terms of its impact on socioeconomic development. Because often when we talk about 5G or 4G or 3G or any other G, I guess most of you probably see it as a very technical jargon or technical acronym or technical speak. But really, it's quite simple, and I'll keep it simple. I'm not a very technical person, even though I have an engineering background. But most of my career in Ericsson has been in different roles, in leadership roles outside of the actual specific technology type positions. But from a broader perspective, Ericsson, we were founded in 1876 in Sweden, Stockholm, Sweden. We built the first fixed line telecom networks around the world, including in China and Russia in the early 1900s, and across the world in 185 countries we operate with 120,000 people globally. And then, of course, we built and we pioneered the first mobile broadband networks and mobile communication networks since the 1970s and 80s, basically, with the first G, second generation, third generation, fourth generation in Vietnam. Today we're at 4G, which basically reflects greater speeds, bigger bandwidth, internet usage, as opposed to previous generations. For example, first G and second G, 1G, 2G was more about voice communication, text communication. And then with 3G, it was connecting to the internet and having high-speed internet access and being able to work with laptops and other devices remotely. And then, of course, 4G was like 3G, but a lot faster, bigger bandwidth, lower latency, and that, of course, introduced many other applications. And many of you are familiar with Spotify, of course, and Google Maps, and Airbnb and Grab, and all these new applications that have come out, WhatsApp, all these social media platforms that have emerged really have been facilitated and enabled through the 4G mobile internet experience, which is a lot faster than 3G, for example. But with 5G, it's going to be more of a revolutionary change as opposed to an evolutionary one, because really it's going to be more about connecting not only people to the internet, but also things, more of the Internet of Things type vision moving forward. So we expect by 2025 about nearly 30 billion things will be connected to the internet. Anything that benefits from being connected to the internet will be connected to the internet. So it's not going to just be people, but many devices, whether it's robots in manufacturing plants with the introduction of smart manufacturing, Industry 4.0, whether it's robots in remote surgery situations, and of course agriculture, tractors, harvesting equipment also connected to the internet, and also of course wireless connection in mining industry, for example, in Australia. There could be a lot of mining applications with robots and drilling machines going deep into the ground, drilling for whatever, and it's got basically no human intervention. It's all done remotely via mobile broadband. So that's the type of application that 5G will be increasingly used for. It's not going to just be human consumer type applications, which was mainly the case for 4G and 3G and previous to that, but rather it's going to be very much about enterprise and industry, digital transformation. And John mentioned earlier the importance of companies and organizations to digitally transform themselves, especially after the COVID experience. More and more people working remotely, but more and more things done remotely as well. Like instead of visiting hospitals or medical facilities during COVID, many people were able to access their medical practitioner or medical services remotely. And the same can be said for many other type of industries whereby remote access, even transport, for example, with driverless vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and all that sort of stuff in the future. Deliveries will be done by drones, for example, that are unmanned. So clearly there's going to be an application there for a lot of remote mobile broadband experiences through 5G. So 5G will become effectively the critical national infrastructure for countries like Vietnam to further develop, to further become more efficient and productive across various industries. If you look back, actually, someone said, I think it was Winston Churchill, the deeper we look into our history, the further we can see into the future. And basically, I think if we look back in history, if you look back at 1993, when Ericsson first opened its office in Vietnam, that's when we built the first mobile networks in Vietnam together with Mobifone and Vinaphone as our two first customers. Viettel came much later in 2004, and then Vietnam Mobile as well in 2007-8. But those two operators, when they launched their mobile networks, I think in 1993-94, partnering with Ericsson along with other vendors, we built the first mobile networks across the country. So we connected people not only in urban areas, but also rural countryside areas, in mountainous, remote areas, minority areas. So all of a sudden, people were able to communicate in a very effective, efficient way, and that helped drive economic development. I don't think it's any coincidence that in the last 27, 28 years, we've seen an average GDP growth rate in Vietnam of over 6%. And a lot of that's become increasingly inclusive and sustainable GDP growth. And I think that's very much been fueled by the mobile industry, mobile communication industry. Also, the poverty rate back in 1993, when Ericsson first launched in Vietnam, was about 53%. Today, it's less than 3%. And internet usage. So Vietnam now, I think, is ranked in the top 17 countries in the world for internet usage. And most of that, about 80% of it, is mobile broadband access. So whether it's 4G or 3G before that, and certainly with 5G, I think that number will increase dramatically, not only for consumers, but like I mentioned earlier, also with enterprises and devices across various industries. So the government and the people of Vietnam, I think, have been extraordinarily visionary and very strategic in embracing ICT, embracing digital infrastructure as an enabling platform for future development. Because if you look back at the last 30 years, having also been the former co-chairman of the European Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam, I can also tell you that about $350 billion worth of FDI, foreign direct investment, has come into Vietnam in the last 30 years. And that has also fueled this fantastic, phenomenal, miraculous GDP journey and socioeconomic development journey, this leapfrogging of Vietnam in many ways over many other countries in the region. But a lot of that FDI, a lot of that $350 billion has been very much around low skill-based, labor-intensive, low-cost manufacturing. And today, I think manufacturing, agriculture, fishery, forestry, retail, those industries account for about 70-odd% of the total employment of Vietnam. So it's definitely created jobs, it's created sustainable development in many ways, or socioeconomic development, I should say. But in terms of sustainable development moving forward, the government understands that labour productivity growth rates have to continuously improve in order to be competitive versus other countries in the region, whether it's Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and to be more competitive and more efficient and productive in manufacturing, for example, as one of the key industries which accounts for about 18% of the GDP of Vietnam, and agriculture and retail and fishery and forestry. These industries need to embrace Industry 4.0, the fourth industrial revolution, which is really all about the cyber and physical world coming together with regards to the Internet of Things, basically fueling efficiency through digital transformation. And for that to happen, you need 5G. 5G is the critical national infrastructure that will enable and accelerate the introduction, the adoption of Industry 4.0 manufacturing, along with other industries, to help them become more productive and efficient, so they're more competitive, and they can attract then more manufacturing and more agriculture and more investment in, for example, transport, healthcare, education, and other industries as well to Vietnam. And Vietnam has many positive things going for it. Not only does it have a government with a very clear strategy and vision around embracing digital transformation, especially with recent resolutions, 51 set out by the Politburo last year in September, which aims basically for Vietnam to have about 20% of its total GDP attributed to the digital economy by 2025 and 30% of the GDP attributed to the digital economy by 2030, 7% labour productivity growth rates per annum by 2025. These type of initiatives, this type of focus by the government and the party is very, very important. Also, the recent Resolution 161, which looks at really accelerating the digital transformation of state-owned enterprises, and also the National Program for Digital Transformation, also announced recently by the Prime Minister of Vietnam. These are all fantastic initiatives, along with the National Innovation Centre for the Ministry of Planning and Investment in Hoa Lac, and along with a lot of other smart city initiatives across Vietnam. All these type of initiatives, including startup entrepreneurship, etc., all these things are helping accelerate the adoption of digital transformation across industries in Vietnam to help them become more competitive so they can attract more high-tech foreign direct investment, so that more high-tech foreign direct investment can come to Vietnam, so that the next wave of socioeconomic development won't be driven as much by the older traditional economic drivers like cheap land and natural resources and low-cost labour, but rather by the new economic drivers like science and technology and innovation and startup entrepreneurship. And that will be very much driving not only or creating even the next wave of socioeconomic development, but it's very much important in terms of creating new jobs. Because I'm sure some of you are probably already thinking, well, Dennis, you mentioned earlier that 70% of jobs are across these 5 industries. And if you become more productive and efficient by adopting digital transformation, won't a lot of those jobs be automated? Won't robots effectively take the jobs of people so that there'll be a lot of unemployment potentially? Well, the answer to that question is a simple one. It's basically no, because with every industrial revolution, whether it was the first industrial revolution with a steam engine moving across to electric powered manufacturing, and of course then with automation and with IT and computer generated manufacturing or computer led manufacturing in the 70s, and then now with the 4th industrial revolution, with every subsequent revolution, more jobs were created, new industries were created to absorb and to create new jobs to compensate for those that were lost. Sure, we don't manufacture carriages anymore. We don't have people transported around the city in horse and carriage, but the automotive industry emerged out of that particular change. And of course, in the automotive industry, there's many, many more people employed globally today than there was when there were horses and carriages taking us all around 100 years ago. So with every subsequent revolution, there'll be new jobs, but that's why it's so critically important that we see the digital infrastructure, in this case 5G, as being important not only for helping industries become more efficient and productive, but also for helping create a platform, an innovation platform that can help generate startup entrepreneurship, innovation between not only companies, but companies and universities in partnership, for example, with government, the triple helix model, where you have government and educational academia and enterprises like Ericsson and operators like VNPT and Viatel partnering and creating startup entrepreneurship opportunities, which will create new industries, ones that we haven't even imagined today. I mean, we wouldn't have imagined Airbnb or Grab or any social media platform for that matter, Facebook certainly, before 2000. We wouldn't have imagined any of these companies making so much money and being so successful and hiring so many people. We wouldn't have understood that the term social media. Who would have known that term 20 years ago? I don't know about you, John, but 20 years ago, when I was 42 and in Ericsson at that stage for 20 years, I would never have imagined where we are today. So I think in the next 10 years, certainly enabled by 5G and all these wonderful young people in Vietnam, and when I say young, I mean mindset-wise, not just in terms of age. I think Vietnam has a very strong blessing. It's got a lot of people that are very focused, very youthful in their mindset, always looking for the next technological advancement, always looking to create new opportunities for yourselves as individuals, but also as companies. So I think Vietnam is really blessed. I mean, I think 90% of the workforce of Vietnam is hired across SMEs, small, medium enterprises. And that's fantastic. And I think SMEs account for about 60 to 70% of the GDP. So it's super important that small, medium enterprises in Vietnam really embrace digital transformation, take full advantage of the opportunities that will come with 5G, become more productive, efficient, take advantage of the free trade agreements that Vietnam has successfully signed. Vietnam has been really successful. Again, in my previous role, together with Ericsson, as the former co-chairman of the European Chamber of Commerce, I can tell you that Vietnam has done a great job in signing the EVFTA, the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement. Last year it was ratified and then subsequently implemented since 1st of August this year, along with the RCEP, along with the CPTPP and many others. I think there's about 13 or 14 free trade agreements. To take full advantage of those, companies to become more competitive and really take advantage of the trade opportunities and the investment opportunities, both in Vietnam but also abroad. Digital transformation will be pivotal to that success. And I'm encouraged by seeing so many companies in Vietnam focused on that. I'm also encouraged by the fact that the Vietnamese government has also not only embraced digital infrastructure like 5G moving forward, but also they've embraced, of course, administrative procedural reforms in doing business in Vietnam more efficient and productive. Regulations, policies, and legal frameworks have become simpler. At the same time, there's a lot of focus on women in leadership. So I think 1/4 of SMEs in Vietnam are led by women, which is fantastic. And the government's got, I think, a goal of maybe 1/3 being run by women by a certain time frame in the near future. So that's a really positive as well. I think for Vietnam, the gender gap is quite small compared to many other countries. 73% of women are gainfully employed in Vietnam, and 83% of men are gainfully employed in Vietnam. So the gap, 10%, is still there, but it's quite small compared to many other countries. And then, of course, you've got political stability. Vietnam has a lot of political stability, which is very important. It's one of the most politically stable countries in the world. And of course, there's a strong focus on education and training and innovation. And a lot of energy goes into education and training for not only the young people coming through primary, secondary school, high school, and tertiary education like yourselves, but also in terms of upskilling and reskilling the existing workforce so that they can be digitally transform themselves in terms of their knowledge and skills in order to be able to embrace the new jobs that will come up in the new industries and new startups that are created in Vietnam. I believe that the next Apples and Facebooks and Microsofts and IBMs a lot of them will come from Vietnam. And that will be enabled not only by the ambition and the education focus of all these people in Vietnam, which are fantastic, but also by a very good policy set out by the government of Vietnam. So I think it's a truly exciting time for Vietnam moving forward. I'm proud to say in conclusion that we did our first 5G technical trials last year with Viettel and other operators, but then we did the first commercial 5G trial last week on the 30th of November with Viettel in downtown Hanoi, and we're planning to do the same with VNPT and Mobifone later this month. And then, of course, the 5G licenses will be issued officially next year to the operators, and we expect hopefully that by the end of next year, 5G will start becoming commercially launched in Vietnam, and that will really help enable the acceleration of digital transformation across the community, the consumer landscape, but also the enterprise industry landscape across Vietnam, so that Vietnam can fully embrace and take full advantage of the opportunities that you have before you. That's my 20 minutes, and I'm happy to take questions at any stage, and I'm happy also to participate in other future events or lectures. If any of the people around RMIT wish to invite me back for future presentations or seminars, I'm more than happy to do that, because Ericsson really does embrace working with academia. We have 40 partnerships globally with universities doing research, but also in Vietnam, we're looking to increasingly partner with universities like RMIT and the Hanoi University of Science and Technology as well, and others, but especially RMIT. I've had the pleasure of meeting Phil. He's a great guy, and we had a couple of drinks and chatted about a lot of things, and certainly we are keen to work with RMIT in a deep and meaningful way. Julia as well, I had the pleasure of meeting recently. at another event. So really, the people at RMIT and John today, I've had the pleasure of meeting for the first time as well, and via email over the last few days. So we're really keen to work with RMIT. We're inspired to work with you. And I'm from Melbourne originally, by the way, and that's what the M stands for. So I'm happy about that as well. So I haven't lived there for 20 years, by the way, but I love Melbourne, of course. That's where my family are.
Great.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Chau.
Wow, excellent. I really impressive and a lot of insightful comments there. So before we go further, and I'm asking you some questions from the journalists and from the students, I'm just blown away by some of the facts that you present. And also you say you come from Melbourne. Well, my kids were born in Melbourne, so but we haven't been back for a long time, so we can go together one day. Thank you. A few things that really good point. Number one is that, from Miss Jota, she said that she knows you because she is the director of Walsh and you Eurojam, right?
Eurojam, not Auscham, but Eurojam, yeah.
Yeah. So she knows the similarities, between your presentation and her presentation is in there. I don't want to go too much into detail, but the point I try to raise is, look at you and Chau, the optimistic, atmosphere and the attitude, right? Say there. So really, I enjoy. I think the government of Vietnam and also my students also very happy because you optimistic and the jams also help also optimistic about Vietnam. So which means that you translate that attitude and energy to others. So people keep coming to Vietnam to invest and do business here.
Well, we have nearly 500 people working here in Vietnam, and most of them, of course, are Vietnamese people, and they're the ones that motivate me every day. They're far more talented, far more skillful, far more competent and capable than I am in mobile broadband telecommunications, especially.
Thank you. Yeah.
And they inspire me every day. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks. The second point I'm trying to make is you mentioned early on, and we're really looking forward, and our students and also our young generation in Vietnam is technology based, gonna be ours competitive advantage in the future. So it's no longer cheap labor and things. It can be last for a few more years, but not forever, right? So that, and then we will deal with the middle income track that our students also learn about that as well. The third point you mentioned, I blow away again with that one is you mentioned about the egos, right? So kind of the big tech firms like Apple, Amazon, and Facebook and things. So in here now we try to attract them. They say that we build the nest to attract them, but I like your idea that we are nurturing them, and then become the ego from Vietnam, become born global firms in the very near future. So far, as far as I know, we have two born global, VNPay and also VNPay. VNG, which is VNG, right? Been against previously. So anyway, we look forward to. And finally, you said that you really would like to collaborate with academia. So we have Smart City here, and we about to organize. And this year, so would love to have you get high profile leader from government, central government, and here Ho Chi Minh City will attend. So I will keep in touch.
I'll be proud to do that. Happy to do that. Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Now look, the second part now starts. We have the panel discussion, but I know that you have to leave a bit early. So we have a few questions from journalists. So can you spend about a few minutes to answer briefly? Yeah. Journalists, they have actually the student have one as well, but basically they asked about the three questions. The number one is, what do you think about the policy and strategy for digital transformation in the public and private sector in Vietnam? So that's number one. I will go back to the second one by one, otherwise it's too many for you, right?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that earlier, probably in my speech already, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there's a strong adoption already. A lot of companies are really embracing technology or digital transformation, especially with COVID-19. I think that really helped accelerate companies' awareness of the importance of having their workforce digitally enabled and capable of being able to work remotely and basically study remotely. Of course, a lot of your students all studying remotely as well. And I think Vietnam has got a strong focus on that. The Vietnam Chamber of Commerce and Industry, VCCI, Dr. Lop and his team are very focused, strongly focused on accelerating digital transformation across SMEs to help them become more sustainable and competitive and inclusive. So clearly that's a strong focus in Vietnam across the government and across the people and the SMEs.
Excellent. Thank you. And also the public, you did mention in your presentation, already. So, but you want to say something about the strategy for public sectors, more about the local and central government?
Sure. I think the government's got a very strong focus on this. And I mentioned earlier the Resolution 51 from the Politburo that was released last year in September, I think 2019, and also Resolution 161 and the National Program for Digital Transformation. The NIC, the National Innovation Centre, there's a strong focus there, driven very well by the Ministry of Planning and Investment. And of course, in general, when it comes to education training, startup entrepreneurship, there's a strong focus by the government to promote startup entrepreneurship and with funding and all sorts of things. And I think it's important that academia continues to work closely with enterprise and government in that triple helix model to help really accelerate that and facilitate that further. So there's a strong focus there, clearly. And we're encouraged by that. Various smart city developments happening. I've been to a few in Da Nang as well. They've got the IT centres there, or the IT software parks and industry innovation environments there that are really trying to bring together different parties. I mean, it's all about partnership. 5G is very much about ecosystem partnerships, whether it be mobile operators together with companies like Ericsson, vendors that create and develop the infrastructure, but also content providers, application developers, and startup entrepreneurs and university graduates and research, people involved in research at universities. All these people need to come together and partner and work together in a collaborative way. And that's clearly being facilitated in Vietnam by the government in many, many different ways. Make in Vietnam, of course, is another fantastic policy that we believe in as well. Really a lot of homegrown technology now is coming out of Vietnam, not only for use in Vietnam, but also for potential export. So that's a great initiative also by the government and the people.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. Another related question to the first one is also come from Vietnam Investment Review. That's also one of the famous newspapers, right? So they're asking about people talk a lot about from policy to practice. So the implementation, part of it. So what are your comment on that? Because people just worry that from policy and they say from talk to from mouth to hand is so long. So what's your view on that? You say that okay, initiative is there, policy is there, but how they implement? What do you comment on that?
I think the implementation is definitely there. You can see that in the results. I mean, clearly, even during COVID, we've seen that in many parts of the world, countries have, obviously because of increased lockdown as well, but also for other reasons, their GDP has taken a major hit, whereas Vietnam has still managed to stay above the line, above the waterline, and also projecting quite good GDP growth next year. So clearly, you can see from the results, they speak louder than anything else. And economic results, socio-economic results are continuously indicating that Vietnam is implementing a lot of these policies in different ways at a different pace and far quicker, in my view, than many other countries in the region, actually. So the adoption of these new policies and guidelines and directives and legal frameworks and instructions around digital transformation, I can clearly tell you, having worked for Ericsson in Vietnam for the last few years in particular, is being embraced very dramatically. So I think Vietnamese people in general are very pragmatic and very practical. So I think the bridge between theory and practice is clearly there and there's a strong focus on it. Of course, everything takes time, but I think in Vietnam, things are moving as quick as anywhere else I've been working in my 30 years in Ericsson. So things are moving faster and faster. And often people ask me questions like, how does Vietnam rate, or how do you compare Vietnam to Sweden or Australia or Italy or somewhere else? And I always answer the same way. I don't think it's good to compare countries. I think it's important to compare Vietnam to itself. Look at Vietnam today compared to Vietnam 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I'm a big fan of history and the history and the historic journey of Vietnam, the transformation, the phenomenal transformation of Vietnam socioeconomically, and also in terms of the impact on the environment over the last 20, 30 years has been a miracle. I think Vietnam has leapfrogged many other countries in ASEAN and also in APAC and around the world because of its adoption of new policies and its adoption of digital transformation and modern ways of working and new technologies and new procedures and processes. I think people in Vietnam are keen to learn, always hungry to learn and always hungry to develop. And that's something I think all Vietnamese people should be very proud of, actually. I don't think you realize how good you are. Sometimes I think people are very, very humble. And I keep telling my people in Ericsson, you're a lot better than you think, because they often look at international countries or developed countries as leading the way in many ways. But I can tell you now, Vietnam has proven itself many times over, and especially this year during this global pandemic challenge period, and even during the floods and the challenges that you had there as well, especially in central Vietnam. I mean, Vietnam is always able to rise to the challenge. Vietnam and its people are always able to execute and implement ways of working that are pragmatic, practical, and relevant in order to basically sustain your future moving forward. And you've always proven yourselves to be very resilient. I think if there's a word I'd love to use in Vietnam, it's resilient. Vietnamese people and Vietnamese industry is very resilient, and your economy is very resilient because of the policies and the way they're implemented. Excellent.
I hope that, you know, I and John, when we come back to the class, we transfer the energy, the optimism from you to our students, really. And they are, you know, in here in the class, in this conference, right? So really looking forward to, you know, see you more and also, you know, hear more. We have one more question regarding the business environment. I need your observe on that, but before I give you 3 minutes, 4 minutes to think about that. While we listen to Chau, Chau will also answer the also similar. So as kind of interactions between you and Chau, only 5 minutes, and then you can leave, right? So you know that China, Mr. Chau, by the way, China +1 strategy and the trade war and the raising costs in China and uncertainty of the COVID and geopolitics and that sort of thing. A lot of international companies, you know, have found Vietnam as, you know, another choice apart from China. So Vietnam government say, try to attract ego, like I mentioned earlier, it means the high tech, the most sustainable, good investor to come to Vietnam. But it seems like they still select Singapore because we look at the statistics, more and more people, you know, investors come to Singapore and other countries, also to Vietnam. So my question is, how could Vietnam, or what can we do in terms of from the perspective of an investor to attract more egos in a sense to Vietnam? So you first, and then Dennis can answer the question from the BCCI. They say, what is your assessment? It means what's your view on the business environment in Vietnam? Because Chau will answer, and then you will go, and that is really helpful for that answer. Thank you.
Okay. So from like I said, I work for a private equity in real estate, and we're actually head office in Singapore. So yes, the competitiveness between a choice of coming into or investing into Singapore, for example, in Vietnam, but there are clear differences or preferences why we would go to Vietnam and not to Singapore, for example. Right. So, like I said earlier in when I spoke, it's about the low cost of entry in terms of the you know, basically, as we know, over in Singapore, yes, you have much more transparency, you have speed, you have expertise, or in terms of efficiency of service. Yeah. Here in Vietnam, we are still an emerging market where a lot of our young workers, for example, are still learning the skills. But the cost of entry is much cheaper. There is much more room in terms of, and I think what Dennis has said is very true, is the Vietnamese people are very humble and yet very eager to learn, very, very enthusiastic. And I think that's very different in terms of how Singaporeans are. This is my personal comparison, how Singaporeans are compared to Vietnamese. We would be more willing in terms of people to people, in terms of, because we're humble, hence we take everything in and we learn and we try to adapt and we do as we do. And it clearly shows in terms of how we've adapted to COVID. But another thing I think is in terms of attracting big investors, I think the biggest problem that we haven't done ourselves a good job at, and we're only doing it accidentally, coincidentally, post-COVID, is to publicize more in terms of what we have to offer. And I think Vietnam accidentally, let's say that word, came into the limelight because of how we dealt with COVID. Right. And it was from there, and of course, leading up to COVID, Vietnam was already starting to be a red dot on the map in terms of investment. People are starting to come in and find out what's Vietnam all about, what does it have to offer, and they're starting to do feasibility studies, but yet to come in. And then as soon as COVID happens, there's more zoom, more focus in terms of how Vietnam is managing and dealing. And and I agree to what Dennis said earlier, and I'm the same, is that Vietnam is considered to be a stable economy, the political stability, as well as the stability in terms of the economic drive of where Vietnam wants to be. It's very clear. So I think, I don't know if you read, but just recently, Keppel has raised a $400 million fund to invest in Vietnam. Now, they've been here for years. They've been here for 10+ years, investing in Vietnam, but crunching away, investing with Vietnamese local partners. But here they're bringing in a fund similar to what Vina Capital has done many years ago, right. Indochina, all of that, right? But now you're actually seeing a Vietnam-specific fund, and this is post-global GFC. This would be one of your first biggest funds, and I'm talking about using the name Keppel. Of course, you've got the influence, the Warburg Pincus joint venture with Becamex and in terms of industrial parks or logistics. But I'm talking about this is specifically from that kind of eagle that you're saying. Yeah. And this, you're going to see more of it because this clearly shows and underline the competitiveness of Vietnam at the moment. So I think Vietnam's already done itself in terms of calling for and attracting foreign investors. Now it's, do we have enough room? Right.
What's your take on that, Dennis?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think clearly you look at the global competitive index, the World Bank runs every year, and Vietnam continues to improve every year in terms of ease of doing business, in terms of innovation capacity. So clearly that's a positive sign. And then at the same time, of course, the government's very focused on ensuring that Vietnamese companies become more competitive so that they can integrate themselves in the global supply chain of foreign direct investment companies and other manufacturers in Vietnam. So even foreign manufacturers come into Vietnam, of course, and hopefully utilize components from Vietnam. And Ericsson is looking at that too from our global supply chain perspective. We're very seriously looking at Vietnamese companies that can provide components and different resources for our global supply chain, not just for what we do in Vietnam. So clearly that's a key. And then also the free trade agreements I mentioned earlier is also an incentive for companies in Vietnam to be more competitive. So I think Vietnamese companies have got every motivation to increase competitiveness, increase efficiency and productivity through digital transformation. And the opportunities are huge because clearly I think 2/3, roughly 67% of all the world's manufacturing will be done in Asia Pacific. I was going to say Vietnam, let's hope so, but Asia Pacific by 2025. So 2/3 of manufacturing is going to be in Asia Pacific in 2025. And if Vietnam can capture a big slice of that action, that'll be fantastic for the economy and the people of Vietnam. And I believe they will. And I think Vietnamese companies are continuously on that improvement journey to be more competitive and embrace these opportunities that emerge, as well as potentially not only from foreign direct investment, but in terms of international trade and export. So that'll happen without question, I think. So I'm encouraged by the comments from Chum as well. I'm aligned with those comments here.
Yeah, excellent. I did give you a statistics related to what you and Ms. Chau just said. At RMIT, our student here, more than 100 students joining from beginning until now. What they are mostly from IB student, international business, and we take about almost 20% total students at RMIT, right, study in this because of what you say, Joe say, right? The people will come the country open and will really open to the world. The RCEP that John presented is the 14th one in Vietnam to welcome people. So I think it's it's a lot, but we time limited. We have another 15 minutes for other speaker also to comment. I will come back to you, Chau, but I know, Dennis, if you can stay for another 15 minutes, it would be great. But if you leave, I know that you're busy, and then that's totally fine. We have small gift from Hanoi. Chau, John would have to hand over at the token of appreciation. And we look forward to meeting you in a big event with external, because this is more or less internal.
Sure.
Bigger external with the even the minister and more to China.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I've got a meeting to go to at 5 that I need to head off to now. But thank you for inviting me today. It's been my honour and pleasure joining you all. And please take my willingness to present and share and really partner with you guys moving forward as genuine and authentic. I don't say it to be nice. I actually mean it. I'd love to be involved more and more with what you guys do. I think the future is Vietnam, and the youth in Vietnam is the future. And we'd love to be impacting that, of course, in a significant way.
Yes,
so
the future in Vietnam.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes. Thank you so much once again. John,
you.
please represent RMIT to give him a token of appreciation, please. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye for now. We still have 3 speakers, right? We have still burning questions to ask, please. So stay tuned, right? The next one would be for Felix. I know that the opportunity is there, but whether you take it or not it depends on your skills, right? Depend on how you go to class, what is the attitude, how can you learn. So my question for you, Felix, is that for a typical student nowadays, they have so many distractions, right? Facebook. I even go to Facebook, you go to class, a lot of students Facebook. I dislike the idea. I say that waste your parents' money, but we can't stop them. So Felix, can you tell us, a lot of distractions. So how would you suggest our students to cope with this while acquire all of the important or the must-have skills that you presented?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Dr. Trong. It's a really good one. And it is something that it's not just students. I think all of us have a lot of distractions in our lives right now. I mean, I think for that question, I would probably say 3 things. First thing is developing focus. Now that's pretty difficult to do, but if you can focus on your why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you studying, or why are you working? What is your why, and what's it all about for your future? If you can identify that will really keep you going, even through difficult times, even through a lot of distractions. Second thing, time management. A skill that many students tell me that they really struggle with. Time management is one of those things. If you can manage your time, then you have more time to get things done that you want to get done. One of the best ways of managing time that I've found, that someone shared with me, is that with everything that I've got, I used to be someone, I would write a lot of things on post-it notes because I love writing lists. But better than that, book slots of time in your online calendar, in your digital calendar. Book time to do the various things that you need to do, whether it's your assignments, whether it's to catch up with friends, go to the gym, whatever it might be. Book that time in your calendar, and I find that way I get my to-do list done and I make sure I have time to do it. And finally, I think it's about managing our energy. If we're able to manage our energy well, then it will help us to deal with distractions, to get things done, and to make better decisions. So how do we manage our energy? Well, we've got to sleep well. So you've got to have good sleep hygiene. Turn off that phone. Try not to have it in the bedroom. Be in a cool room. All the sorts of things that they say. Eat well. Eat, your fruit and veggies, some protein. Really look after yourself as far as your diet goes, and exercise, or get out there and walk in some nature. Like really try and get away, not scrolling your phone, not looking down, just admiring, a bit of mindfulness as you're walking around. And I think that those things will help you manage your energy. So focus on your why, time management, ideally by using online calendar, and managing your energy by sleeping, eating well, and getting some exercise and getting outside and getting your eyes off the screen.
Excellent. I think that is very useful advice for our future Vietnam Eagle, right? Like we mentioned.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. And now back to John with the question from a journalist. It's also my question as well. It's a lot of similarity in this question from a journalist and from me. And my students also know this is my concern. Why are we really, welcoming the RCEP? But look at the trade deficit between Vietnam and other Asian countries, like China, like South Korea and others. And this trade deal is more or less more about Asian countries rather than US, European, right? So they are concerned, the challenge ahead, because so many similarity in terms of the product and service that Vietnam offers to the rest and also from others. And also, those firms from China and others, actually stronger than Vietnamese firm. We have the missing the middle like you presented, and also Dennis also presented also in our book also talking about that. So how can the very micro and small can tap the opportunity given or provided by the RCEP, and by the time they can reach other competitors from other regions like from China and others, they will reap the benefit. So what's your takes on that, John, please?
Well, as I mentioned, there are various steps that can be taken. One of them is through digitalization. One is through constant upskilling and learning and trying to achieve economy of learning, and through taking advantage of what government schemes might exist to promote skills throughout the company, and finding ways to reward workers who skill themselves and trying to promote longer terms of employment than often exist. Vietnam as a country with a lack of skilled labor tends to suffer from, it's not the only country, but tends to suffer from the butterfly syndrome, where a skilled worker will go to one company, reap the benefit with a hiring on fee and so forth, stay there a short while, and then probably move to another company which will offer another better short-term benefit. So it's thinking in the long term, how can the company enhance its human and technological skills and be agile and alert to potential opportunities and not be frightened, right? Not be frightened of the opposition, be patient, as I say, like a samurai, ready to strike when the moment comes along.
Excellent. In that question, before I go to Ms. Jota on the culture question from students, I would like to ask you also, actually from journalists, right? So what are those skills and knowledge needed for business to be successful in the international market?
Well, I remember when I used to live in Thailand, before I came to Vietnam, I spoke to the CEO of CP, one of the largest companies in Thailand, Phan. They do a lot of chickens and 7-Eleven across China and so forth. And he was looking forward to recruit graduates. And he said, the skills I want are people who can speak English, people who can speak Chinese, and the rest we will teach them. Okay, though if you have the basic requirements and you're willing to be able to speak to people, the rest can be learned in the company. So I think it's more a question of, which I think our students do very well, I guess we can take a small amount of credit for this, is to become confident and to be able to speak with people, whoever they might be, right? When somebody comes to the university, our students are willing to talk to them, whether they are the king or queen of any country or whoever it might be. They are not off put by this. And this is a real difference between our students and the students from other universities. And this, I think, is a leading part of what makes our students employable.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, thank you. I think it's now for Chau from students' questions. I saw that you mentioned earlier about the culture in Vietnam, considered as the collective right? And can you be more specific on the advantage of the barrier? Okay.
So this is the reverse of what Felicity was talking about. So Felicity was talking about culture in terms of cultural intelligence of us or you being a student, taking in the skills that you need in terms of working in an international firm or in a globalized economy, for example. So in the reverse, it's international companies or foreign companies like ours coming into Vietnam, and we're going to have to do the same thing. That is, we're going to need to learn how to work in the culture of Vietnamese. And just so you know, I recently got invited to speak to a group of Australian business people of how to deal with Vietnamese or work with Vietnamese culturally. And the difference in the culture is we as Vietnamese, or each of us working in Vietnam, we pick up the culture difference very easily because we live in it and we feel it. It's like we're crossing the road and we follow the rhythms, right? But for a new investor coming in, it's very hard. So for example, just talk about the meeting etiquettes of Vietnam. So when we go into a meeting in Vietnam, you're talking about a corporate meeting, and you go in and you sit. The person who is chair or the person who is the head of the corporate or head of that meeting would sit in the middle of the table or at the two ends of the table.
Right.
And then if it's a meeting of the other side with the other party, then you're going to have to sit directly across your equivalent. Australia, for example, don't do that. You go into a meeting and you just take any, you take any seat. And what we do is we respect each other's, and not that I'm saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, but Australians, for example, would listen to others' critiques in a meeting. And we say, oh, how come we should be doing that? And everybody in that meeting would have an equal voice. Whereas in Vietnam, the etiquettes of meeting in Vietnam or of the hierarchy of working in Vietnam is very different in that even though you're in that meeting room, each of us has a different role and each of us has a different weight to what we say. So in that room, although there's a line, the chairperson or the person who leads the meeting sits in the middle, and then you've got all the rest on the side, nobody speaks. And the only person that can make the decision is that person in the middle. Australians didn't get that, the business people. So what happens for businesses that I was speaking with was they sat there and they spoke cross table to anyone. So basically like what we're doing now.
Like
I'm talking,
sharing, yeah?
that's right, I'm talking, and then Felicity says, but Chau, I don't agree with that. And then John says, oh, I'd like to add that, right? That doesn't happen in Vietnam. And it confuses the foreigners because the foreigners are, why aren't they talking? Are they agreeing or they're not agreeing? And the silence. So culture here means a lot of things. For Vietnamese, when we listen and we take things in, we agree or disagree, we say yes. Yes, that's right. Or we're just silent. But that doesn't mean we agree or disagree, nor does it mean we understand or don't understand. All that we're saying is, I hear you, right? So it's those cultural nuances that is very hard for a foreign investor coming in, because the hardest thing to close a deal for a foreign investor in any field is to strike a deal or to reach an agreement of how to proceed. And it's reading the language and the culture of understanding how that works to then be able to have a direct dialogue and get where you want to be is the difficulty. And this is why the advantage of us being in the heart of ASEAN, and we are now being the, what do we call us? We are the waking, we're the dragon that's been sleeping, or something like that, right? So we've been amongst that, and we've been this sleeping dragon for a while, and now we're waking up. And we can take that advantage in terms of the culture that we understand in terms of the Asian culture. But our culture is a barrier in that not a lot of people will understand our styles. So hence what Felicity was saying is the reverse of you needing to understand the reverse, right? And you being the Vietnamese with an international educated platform is the perfect bridging.
Can you hear that, students?
Bridge that gap in terms of the cultural gap.
Right.
So
she talked with energy, and she is the director or the chair of the Asian OSHAM. This is not kidding at all. So it means that you have to break the cultural barriers. And go back to it's also intercultural that you presented earlier, Felix. Time is short, only 1 minute, so very short answer. So John will have one answer, and Felix, if you recruit a new member to your team, what are your selection criteria? Very short.
Oh, okay. I'll give my top 3, but I'll also say, like I think somebody else said, that most skills can be trained. So I'm really focusing on qualities. And I'd also be looking at things that are my weakness. So maybe I don't like to budget, so I might bring in someone who's got really good with financial skills. But if you're talking more generally and focusing on some of the things I mentioned just before, growth mindset, you know, like having people on your team who are willing to get out of their comfort zones and try new things, it's really something that I think is fantastic. Second, that authenticity, being themselves, knowing themselves. So I know who I'm dealing with and we can build our trust very quickly. And number 3, just really being willing to learn and grow. Know that you don't know everything and know that your perspective isn't always the right one, but you're always learning every day.
Yeah, I'm afraid of the Vietnam culture if I don't stop now because Chau will criticize me that, you know, not on time. Yeah, but John, this is a burning question from a student. How Washington consensus affecting Vietnamese investment and FDI, right? So can you give a short answer like Felicity just done?
That's an hour and a half answer, really. Washington consensus. Can I come to my class, right? And I'll tell you about it in great detail.
So don't blame me on timing, right? Because I want to serve you as I want to be the customer service centric. Yeah, but anyway, so the students and audience, I really thank you all the questions. We still have around unanswered 20 questions there, but we can't answer all that. But like John said, join his class or my class, and then and also our RMIT postgraduate. We have a lot more to come. So because time's up, I want to take this chance to once again thank you very much for our wonderful guest speakers, Ms. Jokta, Felicity Brown, and our top academic in the field, Dr. Chau Walsh, and especially the event teams, and especially our admin team, control team, and support for leadership. Really appreciate. And once again, I hope that all of you enjoy this section, even though it's 2 hours non-stop, but really hopeful, useful. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye for now.